Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something that's seriously important, no matter what you're into, what your goals are. Stakeholder management.
Absolutely. And we're going deep with this, folks. We've got some seriously insightful notes here, and we're going to break it all down for you.
Right. This isn't just some buzzword. We're giving you the how-to, the actionable stuff you can actually use. So, like, when I hear stakeholder management, I used to think, big corporations, suits in a boardroom. But this material is saying, hold on. It's way more than that.
It really is. It's about recognizing that almost anything you do, there are stakeholders, right? People who are invested, people who are impacted.
Totally. From a simple project at work to, like, planning a family vacation or something. And this source, they really hit on something.
Yeah. What's that?
It's not just about knowing who those stakeholders are. It's about identifying all of them. Because it's easy to miss some.
Oh, absolutely. That is so key. Because sometimes it's those less obvious ones that can really trip you up. It's like, you mentioned a project at work, right? You map out your team, you think about your boss, but what about that other department that maybe needs to give you some input later on? Or even just like the admin staff who are coordinating schedules and resources, they're stakeholders too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This source actually used a really interesting example talking about even something as simple as a city planning project.
Oh, tell me more.
They were saying, okay, yeah, you think about the residents, right? The city council, developers. But what about the local businesses?
Right.
They're going to be hugely impacted by any changes in the area.
And they often get overlooked, which is like a recipe for disaster, right? Because suddenly you have delays, you have opposition, and it's like, where did that come from?
Exactly. So you've got to cast a wide net, right? Identify anyone and everyone who might be affected. Okay, so we've identified our players, right?
Right.
What's the next move?
Well, this is where things get, I think, really interesting. It's not enough just to know who they are. It's about understanding them. This source called it stakeholder analysis. And it's kind of almost like a strategic game, right?
I like where you're going with this.
You've got to figure out their influence, their interests. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, right? And you've got some stakeholders who are super high influence, high interest. They need to be kept in the loop constantly, maybe even involved in decision making. And then you have others who maybe are low influence, but still high interest. They need to be informed, maybe not bombarded with every single detail.
Giving a chessboard vibe here, right?
Yeah.
You're saying know where your pieces are.
Exactly. And the source, I thought it was really smart. They even broke it down. They were talking about internal versus external stakeholders.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. What's the difference there?
So internal, those are your team members, maybe your direct superiors, people within your organization. External, those are the ones outside, your customers, your clients, maybe even competitors in a way.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Understanding those dynamics, it's huge for prioritizing your efforts. Okay, we've identified our stakeholders, we've analyzed them. What's the next step?
I'm going to guess communication.
Ding, ding, you got it. This source really stressed that communication isn't just a checkbox. It's like the glue that holds everything together.
Makes sense to me.
And it's not just about, sending out mass emails every now and then, right? It's about tailoring your communication strategy.
Oh, okay. Getting a little more nuanced here.
Exactly. So some stakeholders, they might need regular updates, detailed reports, right? Others, maybe a quick summary once a month is enough. It's really about understanding their needs and their preferences.
So it's about finding that right balance.
Exactly, between overwhelming people and keeping them in the dark.
Right, because like you said, bombarding someone with information, that's not effective communication either.
Absolutely not. In fact, it can be just as bad as, not communicating enough, right?
For sure. Okay, so we're talking about communication, but how do we make it, more than just one way?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
How do we move from just talking at our stakeholders to actually engaging them?
Oh, that is such a good question. And it's something this source really emphasizes. It's about building those relationships, right? And it doesn't have to be this complicated thing. Sometimes it's just as simple as actively soliciting their feedback.
Okay, yeah. Showing that you actually care what they think.
Exactly. And acknowledging that feedback, even if you don't necessarily agree with it or can't implement every suggestion, just showing that you're listening goes a long way.
Totally. You know what? This reminds me of a time, it wasn't even a work thing. It was actually planning a surprise party for a friend. And I completely messed up the stakeholder management piece. I was so focused on keeping the surprise, I forgot to really loop in his brother.
Oh, no.
And it almost ruined the whole thing. He was not happy about being left out of the loop.
Yeah. You see, it just goes to show no matter how big or small the thing is.
Stakeholders are stakeholders.
And managing those expectations, like we talked about, it's critical. That's another big thing this source really emphasizes.
Oh, yeah, the expectations game. That can be a minefield if you're not careful, right?
For sure. I think we've all been part of projects where, like, something blows up because someone thought someone else was handling it.
Or they had, like, a completely different timeline in their head.
Exactly. And this source was really clear about that. They were saying, you've got to be upfront about the challenges, about the timelines, the limitations.
Transparency is key, right?
100%. Because even with the best planning, sometimes things happen, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Maybe a deadline gets pushed or there's, I don't know, some unforeseen obstacle. Being open and honest about it, rather than trying to hide it, it builds trust, it builds understanding.
Right. Because trying to be perfect, that just sets you up for failure, probably.
Exactly. Be authentic, be real, and communicate.
I like it. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here. Identifying, analyzing, communication, engagement. But let's be real. Even when you do all of that perfectly, conflict can still rear its ugly head.
It's true. And you know what? This source acknowledges that. It's like inevitable, right?
Yeah, it's like this fundamental law of the universe where you have different people, different perspectives. You're going to have some disagreements.
Precisely. And that's okay. It's not about avoiding conflict altogether. It's about how you manage it.
Right.
And I think that's where all this stuff we've been talking about building those relationships, about clear communication, it all comes together.
So conflict resolution is like built into the stakeholder management DNA.
I would say so. And it's something to keep in mind, you know, from the very beginning. So as we wrap things up here, I'm curious.
Yeah, me too. Like, we've thrown a lot of information out there.
We have. What are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Yeah, what's the so what? Why should they care about any of this?
Because effective stakeholder management, and I think this source really drove this home, it leads to better decisions, stronger support for your endeavors, and ultimately a smoother path to achieving your goals, whatever those goals may be.
That's a pretty compelling argument if you ask me. But here's a thought. We've talked about all this in, like, a general sense, but I challenge you, dear listener.
Yes.
Think about something you're working on right now, a project at work, maybe planning a trip, or even just like a difficult conversation you need to have with a family member or friend.
Ooh, good one.
Who are your stakeholders in that situation? And how can you use what we've talked about today to navigate that more effectively?
Love that, because it's about recognizing that even in our personal lives, these principles apply. We are rarely operating in a vacuum, right?
Totally. There are always stakeholders.
And understanding their perspectives is key to success.
I love it. Well, on that note, a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating world of stakeholder management. We'll see you in the next one.